And, talking about Twitter, well, the platform formerly known as Twitter, now called X because the owner, well, he calls everything that he owns X. Joining me in the studio, the head of digital media at Rhema Media, Justin Smith. Justin, kia ora.
Ata Maria.
Now, we did run out of time to talk about Twitter in particular. I may use those terms interchangeably for the folks listening at home, because, I mean, even though Elon calls it X, it's still Twitter, really, isn't it? It's still pretty much the same thing.
We're still sending tweets on Twitter.
We're not sending X's.
No.
We might send them to our exes, but that's another topic entirely. So, are you a fan? Are you a user? Is Twitter part of your story, Justin?
I've gone through, I've waxed and waned on Twitter /X over the years, and there's been periods where I've gone, this is really, sort of phenomenal. Twitter that promotes discussion and speech in a different context to a lot of other social media platforms. Reddit, where there's a lot of community and discussion still happening, but in a different context. But as of late, in the last year, especially, just no.
A lot of people have got that love-hate relationship and gone like, no, I've done. I'm rage quitting. That's it. In fact, it pushes people to the brink. It literally pushes their buttons in that regard. There was something about Twitter, to call it by its old school name, that some people really liked. And yes, other social media platforms do this as well. But you can actually connect with famous people. You can, hey, on Facebook, you have to be, invited into the inner circle in that regard. But with platforms like Twitter, you can go, hey, I can be part of the social media world of somebody who I admire, who I want to be like. I mean, if it wasn't for Twitter, I'm not sure we'd have influencers.
No, that's a really interesting thought. And, influencers these days compared to what they were originally. You're right. Twitter really, blew up off the back of a lot of activity from especially celebrities and people who you didn't have traditional access to via other mediums and platforms, with which they were just able to espouse these little snippets of thoughts or, comedy, or when they started weighing in on political matters or otherwise is when things started to get a bit sticky. But the point was, you're right, you had access to them and their sort of inner dialogue as it came through their fingertips. You
had access to a higher quality of friends than you could get on Facebook or some of the other platforms, perhaps. No judgment or criticism in that regard. But then, like a lot of things, it got a little bit tribal, and then particularly once we got to a point where there was just a lot of hate, a lot of name calling. Twitter got in a bit of trouble for stuff, and it says, hey, man, you got to clean up your act because this is just a toxic zone. And that is, from my understanding, why a lot of people quit. They went, I can't handle the toxicity of Twitter. I'm done. Twitter needed to clean up his act. It banned some people. It banned the president of the United States, for example.
Yeah, and that's exactly, and so many platforms have run into this issue of, on one hand, we really, especially in America where most of these platforms have originated from, obviously the idea around free speech and the First Amendment and their rights as they see it, just apply to the platform. But of course, in America is one thing when I have the ability to have free speech in the States, but when it comes to the digital platforms and you're now crossing over borders, there is that level of US defaultism is what we call it, where, we just run by the rules here. And, no, not everyone plays by the same rules. Or
the
has
land
the
of the free
values.
and the home and the brave actually breaks some international law, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, not only that, but even just those values of, hold on a second, thanks to the, anonymity that people have with their profiles on Twitter as well, people can now start to espouse, legitimate hate speech, misinformation. And so the platforms themselves have run into this issue where they have to regulate out of necessity, not just for, their advertiser income, but also there's legal requirements for them to do so, as well as obviously their own community standards. When Jack Dorsey started Twitter originally, I'm sure he absolutely thought of all the positive things that it could be and that it did prove to do for a very long time until it naturally hit a, crossroads with people that were using it for nefarious reasons and have just tainted, the waterhole with their own activity.
Twitter, one of the bigger platforms, and like you say, the waterhole was getting a bit brackish, to say the least. But actually, now there's so many platforms. If you get banned from Twitter, who cares, man? You can go somewhere else, or you can start your own platform as the former president of the United States, did in that regard. Where do you sit on this one? Is in the social media space, should it be no holds barred, or should there be, hey, terms and conditions apply, we need to play nice, be grown-ups, be respectful, this isn't a space for hate?
Yeah, certainly the latter. But I mean, the hard one is how do you have that nuanced approach? I mean, even just with platform regulation from, governments or society in general, because obviously the platforms themselves, yes, they're private companies, they get to play by their own rules. But at the same time, they are at this incredible scale where they have the ability to influence politics, society, and culture. And that's what a lot of people are calling out and insisting that they get held accountable for, is the fact that they have this leverage over humanity. But at the same time, they have to balance free speech with, actually making sure that they're protecting their users and the communities and the platforms themselves.
Yeah, and I suppose the question is, who does get to decide? Who is the regulator in that market? Is it the governments? Is it the governments in individual nations? Should there be an international treaty? Or do we just let the guys at Silicon Valley sort it out in a committee as to what's in and what's out? Because that's where things were for a long while.
Yeah, but I mean, then you see the likes of Elon Musk, who's taken over Twitter, renamed it X, and turned it into what he believes is a bastion of free speech. And we can see how that's really had an impact on the user base and people's perceptions of Twitter, X, and can see actually, well, when you just let loose with letting people say whatever they want, post whatever they want. I mean, the stuff that I witnessed going back onto X after all of that had happened, having not been on there for a few years, rocked me. And I've been on the internet for a long time, but still some of the content I saw was just absolutely heinous. And this was just being delivered organically through my feed. And at that point was when it really hit home for me that, okay, you know what? No, there does need to be a line drawn on the sand here, because I'm an internet user that's been exposed to many, heinous thing on the internet over the years. But my children, if they come here and that's their first experience of this platform, and we go, free speech.
Yeah, that's Twitter. Come on.
That's not Twitter. And so,
And I think the thing is, even if you don't go looking for it, this is one of these platforms that you don't have to go hunting for hate. That'll come to you, and it'll come to you pretty quickly and unexpectedly. It's not something that you can filter out. This is quite a different platform than some of the others, perhaps.
And because of the nature of the level of effort required to punch in, originally 144 characters and just, again, espouse a small idea of any variety is very easy to do. I don't have to take a picture. I don't have to take a video. I don't have to edit anything. There's no real content creation that's coming out of it. It is purely just, words. And so it's easy to just sit there and bang out a lot of, in air quotes, content through the platform Twitter. But it's the algorithm is really up against it, trying to balance serving people content that they can see is obviously resonating with people, but it's really hard for it to ascertain that this is resonating for the wrong reasons. And then based on whether or not it can identify that this is actually, potentially a negative spiral, well, then what do you do with that? Because again, this is people and this is us, the human condition, our own, human downfall is that we are drawn to that. I mean, in web terms, to get away from social media, this has been something that's been around for a long time. For someone to go and just leave a positive review about a restaurant that they've visited is really, really hard to do. But you serve one soggy chip and you can guarantee that you'll get an influx of negative reviews. It's a lot easier for us to do that than it is to be positive. And so, that's what these algorithms are having to battle against, is just people wanting to do that. We're drawn to it.
Yeah, and hey, it is that downward spiral of lowest common denominator in that space. Well, hey, thank you for the parental advisory warning on X, formerly known as Twitter. Thanks for the work that you do at Rhema Media. Thanks for joining us today.
Anytime.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.